Aiboan, Vanakkam, Assalamu alaikum, good evening, and a very warm welcome. This is the third in our series of legal resources created and curated to provide you with academic and empirical insights from the experts in the know on various issues of contemporary law as it relates, of course, to business and the various challenges we are faced with as we all embrace this learning curve together. Workplace harassment and equitable employment, a timely and imperative topic, especially given the current socioeconomic climate and business environment. What is workplace harassment? What is equitable employment? Let's have our eminent panel of experts share their views and insights on what promises to be an enlightening session that gives us a broader and clearer understanding of what it all means and how we can, or no, must actually protect ourselves and our greatest assets, our employees. On your panel today, Dinusha Jayamana. Dinusha is a senior human capital professional with experience spanning over 18 years across human resources, legal and process improvement roles in multinational and local organizations in Sri Lanka. She's an attorney at law and holds an MBA from the University of Western Sydney, and she's an SHRM Senior Certified Professional. She is also a certified transformational coach and is a member of the International Coaching Federation and the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. Dinusha currently operates as the Vice President Professional Development for the Association of Human Resource Professionals Sri Lanka and was awarded the Pinnacle Award for HR at the Top 50 Women in Management Awards 2018. Dr. Sulochana Segera is considered a mentor, counselor, and an investor of goodwill. She's the founder and chairperson of Women in Management, and her efforts have encouraged boards to follow a more inclusive leadership in their top-tier management structures. She believes that all recipients of the WIM Top 50 Award in Sri Lanka are inspirational and astute corporate leaders who have endured many challenges and continue to be examples to so many in their roles as leaders with a work-life balance. Dinusha, I believe that's a very nice pat on the back for both you and me. Dr. Sulochana Segera is a certified personality development trainer in Asia. She is a trainer for the World Bank entity IFC on sustainable private sector investment, the official trainer for the Coca-Cola 5x20, which is an initiative for the development of 5 million women by way of empowerment and economic development, for the British Council Active Citizen Project. And she also sits in the advisory, or on the advisory committee rather, of the Ministry of Skills Development, Employment and Labor Relations. Asela Rakova is an attorney at law specializing in criminal litigation and family law. With over 20 years at the private bar, he's an alumni of the Bandaranaike Center for International Studies, where he has pursued interests in transitional justice and post-conflict reconstruction. He's currently reading for his master's in criminal justice administration at the Open University of Colombo. He's a member of the Sri Lanka Bar Association and a member of the International Bar Association, serving on its committees for pro bono, criminal law, and the Asia Pacific Regional Forum. Asela professes a keen interest in the fields of human rights, transitional justice, and the role of civil society in shaping generations to come, and invests his spare time in the academic research and pursuit of transitional justice and post-conflict reconstruction. Your moderator this evening, Mokshini Jayamana, counts over 14 years in active practice in the private bar in the areas of family law, money recovery, land disputes, testamentary actions, and commercial arbitration. Mokshini has held positions in leadership in the Bar Association of Sri Lanka for over 10 years and has been an active member of the Bar Council. She currently serves in the Committee for the Review of Civil Law appointed by the Ministry of Justice and is the convener of the Advisory Committee on Family Law Reform. Mokshini, over to you.
Thank you, Rai. Welcome to every one of you. And let me first and foremost tender my gratitude to the American Chamber for having me, and most importantly for giving me the privilege and the honor to be moderating this extremely timely discussion with such an eminent panel. I think none of them need any introduction, but your introductions did them justice, right? Okay, so let's get down to the topic. sexual harassment in the workplace and also equitable employment. Why do we say that this is a timely topic? Well, if you look at the way the world has evolved over the last 10 years, let's start off from the Me Too movement. We saw the way the Me Too movement just took the entire world by storm. And we saw the way that movement, which was started off by just one woman, Tarana Burke, the way it affected the way business is done in the United States of America. And it has had a spill-on effect to every other part of the world. For example, now states in the United States are introducing protections for more workers. There is now restrictions on non-disclosure agreements. So we see as a result of this movement, the Me Too movement, a lot has changed. But I'm not going to limit it to just that. If we look at the statistics in Sri Lanka and the Asia Pacific region, it is extremely alarming. A recent study has said that 30 to 40% of women workers reported some form of harassment. And according to a World Health Organization study, 57% of female garment workers in Sri Lanka have reportedly faced sexual harassment. And a global study estimated that sexual harassment costs a typical Fortune 500 company as much as $6.7 million a year in absenteeism, low productivity, and employee turnover. Now, this is extremely alarming, but one thing that we would like to cover in addition to all of this is how this form of harassment, mind you, it can be faced by men and women, but we see that the statistics speak for themselves that women are victims more than men are. But overall, sexual harassment and the lack of equitable employment affects a company in that the employees find that it negatively impacts them. In Sri Lanka, a recent study found that workplace harassment negatively affected the performance of their work by 37%. So all of this actually translates to rupees and cents. So what's important now is that first and foremost, to lay the background for the rest of our discussion, I'm going to call upon Mr. Asela Rakava, attorney at law, to lay the foundation and help us to understand what the legal framework is that is in place in Sri Lanka that focuses on either eliminating completely or minimizing sexual harassment in the country and to promote equitable employment. Asela, over to you. I think your microphone is muted. Asela, your microphone is. Okay, great.
Hi, Mokshini. I totally agree with you. It's a very timely topic. In a pandemic situation like this, I think the companies and the employees are very, they are not motivated. They are in a different frame of mind because they are being treated differently. The work setup has changed. So in a context like this, the equitable employment comes into play. Then at this point, we have to initially see what is this concept of equitable employment, whether it's equality or is there anything different to equality. And you stress upon the fact of sexual harassment. I think, Mokshini, we should not strictly go into sexual harassment only. We should go on a very diverse topic. It's a larger topic of workplace harassment. So workplace harassment definitely includes sexual harassment as well. So if I just briefly outline the concept of equitable employment, And we have to initially, like it's shown it on my slide 1, these two concepts, equality and equity, they are very, very closely connected, but it's not the same. So as you see, so in equality, the assumption is that everyone benefits from the same support. That is, this is equal treatment. But equality, as I have mentioned in my slide, is little bit different. So everyone, that is a concept where every worker, every employee of this your company gets the support they need. I will just go into one small tiny example. For an example, the internet use given to a particular the sectors of your company. Now there may be different sectors. There may be fields, like there be people who are in different sectors working in the company. So giving an equal treatment, the hierarchy might feel, okay, I'm going to give them an allowance, 5,000 rupee allowance for every employee. So equality is not that. Equality means depending on your work, depending on your job role, give them what they need. The people who are in the IT sector who are using internet more, give an extra limit. So they should be happy, and that should contribute for their development of the work. So if I put it right, equitable employee means that you provide your employees what they need to provide their best services. So that is equitable employment. So if I translate this in reality, we have categorized this into 6 sectors. So secure employment. So all employees there may be different categories. There can be permanent employees, there can be contracted employees, there can be casual employees. So all should have, regardless of their category, they should have security in their employment. So fair wages. All employees must receive wages commensurate with their experience and expertise, must be fair by their expectations. If you go to a safe workplace condition, working conditions must conform to safety guidelines, but must always mean safety in mind and mental state for all employees. So irrespective of their category, that safety should be secured. If I go for social protection, all employees must feel socially safe, regardless of gender, age, race, disability, and etc. If I go to labor rights and standards, all employees must receive absolute protection of labor rights. So what I say is, in this, although I have categorized, and I have, as I've shown earlier, there may be different sectors, there may be different gender qualities, different sector, like low-end employees, high-end employees, but they should be given equal treatment considering their job. So equality, I have the principle, the definition of equality is set out here. If I read it, equity theory is a theory that attempts to explain relational satisfaction in terms of perception of fair, unfair distributions of resources within interpersonal relationships. So it's very important. As per the motivation theory, an individual motivation level is correlated to his perception of equality, fairness, and justice practiced by the management. Higher is individual's perception of fairness, greater is motivation level and vice versa. So higher they receive, their motivation levels will go up, and the input to the company will be more. So can we go to the next slide? So, like I explained, please note that the fact that I have emphasized earlier that all employees, this means regardless of their cadre, gender, age, or disability. So I have always emphasized on the fact that all employees should be given this treatment. So now, although this is a very important factor, as we all know, the legal framework has some downsides. When we go to implement this type of issues, we come across, mainly the employer come across so many hurdles when they try to implement this type of issues. Now, to discuss about workplace harassment, we have to know what is a workplace. So as I have mentioned in this slide, a workplace would be a location where work is actually conducted. A workplace can be a place where you have workshops, training sessions, learning programs, the courses of official business travel, work-related communications, organized social events and volunteer activities. So all these include a workplace. So if you are talking about harassment, whatever harassment made in any of these places will be harassment. Now this is, in this slide, I have mentioned the most common harassments which are taken place at workplaces. So mostly, I think we talk of sexual harassment. It's a more widely reported harassment. But not only sexual harassment, there is mental, emotional harassment, physical harassment. So mental harassment, they have like, some people will say that I have been put to this mental trauma by my bosses. So there are this type of harassment which we have to categorize as workplace harassment as well. Now, for easy reference and for future reference, I have set out the international covenants and all the instruments where the Sri Lanka has been, we have ratified all these covenants, and all these are, I have listed out for the easy reference. And also we have to see the constitutional provisions which governs discrimination and harassment. Now Article 12.1, Article 14.1 speaks of equality, discrimination. But what we have to understand, all these are of administrative and executive functions. the private sector is not covered when it comes to the constitutional provisions set out in our constitution. So what are the labor laws related to equitable employment or fair treatment? So I have set out. So what we have to understand, I think Dinusha will confirm, most of the laws in this country are always set out to protect the employee. There are no laws which covers the side of an employer. I have listed out so many acts which has been enacted by Parliament. Most of the acts as set out here are acts which are given benefits to the employees. These are laws I have set out: occupational safety and health, compensation laws, laws related to labor relations, laws related to foreign employment, laws related to plantation and estate labor. So all those laws are governing and benefiting the employee. So then we are suggesting some reforms. I think these reforms should be enacted, and I think after the discussion we should share this and we'll discuss and to see what reforms should be needed. I think we should discuss this as a panel. Thank you, Rai. Thank you, Bokshini.
Thanks, Asela. That was extremely informative. I think one main takeaway from this is that we need to remind ourselves of the constitutional provisions which basically guarantee the equal protection of men and women before the law actually are enforceable only against the public authorities, right? So that's where the other laws come into play. And judging by all those slides that you shared, we all know that there is a plethora of laws which actually govern employer-employee relationships. So in addition to, I'm looking forward to the follow-up discussion on the reforms that you are going to suggest. But I think maybe I'm just going to flag this right now before we proceed further. Is there a case for all of these laws to be amalgamated to one composite, all-encompassing labor law? Is the question that I'm going to push to you, because this point has actually been discussed from time to time. So I'll just leave that with you, and let's proceed to the next. Thanks again, Asela. So my next question is actually going to be to Dinusha. Hi, Dinusha. Lovely to see you.
Hi, Bokshini.
So one thing Asela did mention, and I think it's an extremely important point, is when we talk about workplace harassment, we immediately think about sexual harassment. That is, of course, because it is the most, controversial form of harassment. Mm-hmm. And it is also what is given most prominence in media. And also with this whole Me Too movement, there's a lot, it's a hot topic. And I'll be failing in my job as moderator today to highlight the fact that yesterday was International Women's Day. So happy International Women's Day to the beautiful women on the panel. Asela, you're just there as the token male. I'm joking. But yes, thank you so much. What I want to say is, with this Women's Day, there were lots spoken about harassment, right? And most of the time it was about sexual harassment. But I think you'd agree, as someone who has been, involved or is actually an expert in human resource management, and with your years of experience in this, that harassment doesn't take only the form of sexual harassment. There are so many different forms of harassment, and sometimes it becomes systemic to the point that it is a given. Sometimes employees may not even realize that they are being victims of it. Dinusha, could you enlighten our audience on what you have observed to be the most prominent, I don't want to say most prominent, but let's talk about all the types of harassment that you have witnessed in your chosen field of expertise.
Sure, Mokshini. And I must thank Asit. I think he set the context really well at the start. Thanks,
Absolutely.
So I think just from my point of view, see, the right to feel safe and work with dignity is a human right. Yeah, and I think during the recent past, where a lot of unprecedented changes have really taken place. It could be in the way that we work, it could be in the work environments that all these changes have happened. There has been much that has been said and done about this whole concept, which I want to talk about, called psychological safety. Psychological safety is really the ability to be able to show up and work without any fear of negative consequences of it could be self-image, it could be status, it could be career, and this is directed linked to creating a really good environment for people to work, which is free from harassment of any kind, to your point, Mokshini. So it would not necessarily only be sexual harassment, but any form of harassment generally obstructs a person's ability to perform in a high performance environment. So, and actually harassment can happen anywhere, and it can, in my opinion, take two forms. So the first one, if I may, would be like a quid pro quo type of situation. So there is a direct threat or bargaining from a person, let's say in a position of power, in return for something. Right, so these things can include things like what forms the terms and conditions of employment. It could be a certain reward that you're asked to do something to get that. So some examples could be, bosses asking for personal favors, somebody who has a decision-making authority requesting an employee to do something that creates discomfort for the individual can be defined as a harassment in a quid pro quo situation. Now, the second that I would call it would be really creating a hostile working environment. And here it could be things that are like unwelcome gestures, it could be speech, it could even be different approaches, and also conduct that can be abusive in nature. Yeah, and I thought, because the whole sexual harassment was also brought, let me just pinpoint a few examples which would apply in a hostile working environment in relation to that. Because it's often misunderstood, and like if you don't find the person in the actual act of asking something directly in this space, it is misunderstood and sort of let go. But actually, even sexual harassment can extend to multiple forms, which again would make that person uncomfortable. It could be in the physical form, for example, any form of touch, like in the workplace where it's uncomfortable. It could be even proximity. It could be like, invading the personal space of the person, which puts the person in an uncomfortable situation. Secondly, it could be things around, like verbal abuse. It could be certain comments that have been passed. It could be in a meeting. It could be one-to-one. It could be comments with regard to the attire of the individual, of what the person is wearing. And it could be discriminating gender. And again, people would think that this would be only for females, but something that we see trending in workplaces is with the emergence of LGBT. And especially in Sri Lanka, it's like a very a new thing for Sri Lankan workplaces. So people who are inclined towards LGBT are seen as a different sort, and a lot of these type of framing and looking at people in a different lens takes place, and also sometimes comments are being made about physical appearance and not sexual, but really the appearance of individuals per se, which would obviously put people into uncomfortable situations, sometimes about age, about how you look, and there could be sexual jokes that are being shared. All these things fall into the whole gamut of verbal things, and sometimes anonymous calls that happen, and then we have experienced these things in workplaces, and also invitations of different kinds, and if they're repeated and if it impacts the individual and the actual nature of work, that is also abuse or harassment. And different other things like like stalking on social media, which is something that we see, certain messages, text messages, etc., that are being sent through various platforms, and even pictures, like visual display of certain things which would make a team or an individual uncomfortable would be treated as harassment. So those are some examples. So I think an acid test to this whole thing would be really asking questions about, would this particular act make a person uncomfortable, and does it encroach into the personal space? So if it does, it could be some form of harassment, right? So that's something to think through. And harassment doesn't spare any gender, as I said before, it applies to all. And really organizations, if they really want to get the best of their people and their teams, should have very, very clear practices around ethics and conduct, and also embed these through their organizational value systems. It's absolutely important in today's day and age. But most importantly, the onus of being able to spot and understand that harassment is happening and also raise it with the right people really lies with the employee. And most often than not, this is something that is generally ignored. So I'm really looking forward to having a good discussion today on what organizations can do and what employees can do, and also perhaps some of the recourses that are available in such situations that harassment can arise. So that's it from my end for now.
Yeah, thanks, Dinusha. That was actually excellent. Some of the points that you flagged, I don't think most of us were aware of. You spoke about the psychological aspect of it as well. And if you throw in COVID-19 into the mix, it just exacerbates the entire situation. And one thing also that we neglect to discuss, which I'm most grateful to you for, in Sri Lanka, is the whole aspect of the LGBTQ community and the lack of knowledge of Sri Lankans, employers and employees, to this absolutely important issue. But I would really like to, discuss this further with you, Dinusha, and broach the subject a little further on what that we are aware now that these issues do lie, and there are different forms of harassment in the workplace. But as an employer, what can be done to address it and to fix the situation? And you did mention the fact that the onus lies at the end of the day with the employee to actually, recognize that there has been harassment and to actually have the courage to report it. And during my I just did a little bit of research when I was prepping for this webinar, and the statistics are alarming. Apparently the percentage of incidents that are reported, it's less than 4%. And that's in Sri Lanka, but globally it's a lot less. And despite the fact that we have this, we're more aware now, employees and employers are more aware. Despite that, the prevalence of workplace harassment has not reduced. It is actually on the rise. So that's why I'm really grateful that AmCham has actually taken such an important and timely topic, and we had the opportunity to discuss it this evening. So thanks, Dinusha. Thank you so much. I'm going to now discuss another aspect of harassment with our next speaker, Dr. Sulochana. Doctor, thank you once again for taking time off your busy schedule to be with us. You do a lot of work. You perform yeoman service, and you've been recognized for that with multiple awards, not just nationally but internationally. For the work that you have done for the informal labor sector in Sri Lanka, would you kindly enlighten us on where your work takes you and what you have observed to be the forms of harassment that you see in the labor market in Sri Lanka, in the informal sector, and also the different forms, if there is, let me ask you this, is there equitable employment in Sri Lanka in the informal sector? Over to you, Doctor.
Yeah, thank you very much. So coming from Marcella's legal framework to Dinush's corporate, I will mix the both and speak about the corporate legal and the informal sector, because this country runs by the informal sector, right? So I'll just tell, because my background is HR, even though now I'm coming out of the corporate and doing the both, balancing both. As Marcella said, when you say the workplace harassment, it has different aspects. And what is the main thing the harassment starts is the discrimination. The moment you start discriminating, the harassment, whatever it's a psychology, it can be a sexual, it can be a verbal, everything happens. So what is actually the discrimination means? Discrimination comes in a different form. In Sri Lanka, the main discrimination comes from the gender itself, right? During the recruitment. So we have many educated women compared to the men, because female get into a lot of education, because it's difficult for them to strive. So therefore, they ensure that their education background is good. But if you go for an interview, because I have sat for many interviews as an independent interviewer, what I have seen is there are 15 ladies who has the best grade and 5 boys who are equally good, but comparing to the qualification, they are not, right? But that prefer to get a boy out considering the gender, right? So that's where the discrimination start with the gender. Then the discrimination start in Sri Lanka, the race, the religion, and also I would say the class. You know, we think the corporate sector that class is not an issue. Class is an issue. It's, if you really have gone into the informal sector, your jobs are given according to your class, right? So it is an issue in Sri Lanka. Then again, the age, right? So we say we want, when it comes to the senior management, we want a matured, experienced person. So it's not the experience or qualification or competencies we are looking at. It's the age we are looking at. And Sri Lanka has more elderly population compared to the younger population. So there is an issue when you want to fill your vacancies and all that. So age is one of the discriminations. Then the disability, right? That's one of the major discrimination in Sri Lanka. And then they say, if you have, now it's actually has come to an award that if you have employed like 10% of disabled employment are given to disabled, you get an award, which is a discrimination, I think, because they are equally eligible to be working, because they also like human like us. Why you need special quota for, you know, disabled employees? So that is one of the discrimination. These all actually, we look at these things, and these are the small things which starting all these harassments, right? As clearly Dinusha said. But then again, there is another one which I think I have seen. When a lady get pregnant, right? So this was happened 2 weeks ago. This lady who's a lawyer, right? She was practicing, and she got an appointment in a government institute where she was working for 2 years. After 11 years, she got a baby. Now she's almost 1 year. So suddenly she was transferred from Colombo to Batticaloa. And the who transferred? A lady boss who was actually holding a higher position in a government, and who has been seen as one of the most inspirational lady. So when this lady came to me, I spoke to that person and said, it's not nice, because how can she go and find a place where she can keep a 1-year-old baby where she has from like where somewhere like Batiklo, and if she's not speaking the same language, there's no extended family. So they said can't, because it was in the appointment letter and she has signed it. So whether she has a baby or not is not an issue. She has to go. So what she did was she gave the resignation, and she said, I'm a lawyer, I can fight it, but for what? Yes, you have to fight, not for you, but for others, other women. So that's why we have less complaints, because women who can even won't fight for their rights, won't stand up what is wrong. So when we talk about these, workplace harassment, as Asela rightly said, all our laws are protecting the employee. But aren't there harassment against employers too? I know personally, female bosses are being harassed. They have said, if you do this to me, I'm going to put it on the social media. I'm going to put everything. So even the employer is harassed. So workplace harassment does not mean only employee. It's an employer too. So we have to be balanced. End of the day, we have to understand one thing. If you have happy employees, you will have happy customers. But for you to receive happy employees, employer has to create jobs. So you need all three to be successful, because end of the day, it's what we want, right? So discrimination is the first element rather than we find solution. I think prevention of this workplace harassment start at the discrimination. The moment you see this is happening, you have to say, stop it. And why we have less people come in and complaining. If you look at the informal sector, I know personally, because when I was working for a factory, I know 3 cleaning ladies who was harassed. When I said, I will do the independent inquiry, come to me, what they said was, if I come and complain, I will lose the job. And I can't go home, because my husband will ask, why you think that it's a harassment? You have to think about your kids. And my mother-in-law will not accept it, even though I have not done anything wrong. So people who has no power are harassed by people who has power. So the workplace harassment is not only the psychology or not only the, I would say, sexual. It's a power. Using power against someone is also harassment. So sometimes the position which is come to you give you power not to harass or intimidate someone else. And also we think every harassment includes about women. No, the men also has emotion. Men also has feelings. So I do a lot of counseling on these new marriages and employment. So what I got 1 year ago was young couple came to me and said, we are getting married and we have an issue. So the girl was so understanding and said, my fiance was having an affair with the boss, and boss is threatening that if he gets married and if he forget that he will lose the job. How can, because I want him to resign and he can depend on myself till he find a job, but we don't want to tell that to our family, the both families. So that's a huge harassment, right? But how can that person, because he's a guy, he cannot go and tell that to HR, right? So that, because we think that harassment is only about a woman getting hurt because she can cry, she can tell a friend. But there are men who's been harassed who cannot speak out. So I think what we have to look at it, we know it's happening. Rather than we speak on issues, why not we speak on what we can do, how to come out, how the corporates can help, and how the employees can have empathy than sympathy. Because now what has happened is employees and employers has lost trust between them, right? They do not trust each other. That's where these things are not coming. We give a lot of awards saying that this company has huge policies. Are the policies are practical? Are the policies are implemented? Are the policies being informed from head to the lowest employee? Are your security guard knows their policies? Those are the things that we have to talk. Those are the solutions we need to bring. I think I can give 1,000 of examples this has happened, but what are the solutions we can know? As Asela said, there is a province to help or the protect the employee, and the corporate sectors has their policies. So how can we bring this legal and policies together where we protect the employer and the employee? Because end of the all this is what we want is to be happy human beings, right? We are working for our families, and the employer giving it to us. So we have to be like, it's a give and take this thing. We both has to work together. So my this thing is, we'll speak about solutions rather than, we know issues are there. Every day, it's not just one, it's not two, it's more than 10 people, and it's people, not a woman, not a man, right? Employee doesn't have a gender, and leadership doesn't have a gender. Harassment doesn't have a gender. Law doesn't have a gender. If we can be like that, if we can think like that, I think this workplace harassment, when I had a session for workplace harassment, one corporate said, Sulochana, we want you all to come and do it in our office. I said, okay, we can. But they suddenly said, no, don't come. Our male bosses got really hurt that we are having an issue. Training like this. Why? Because they have title, it's a workplace harassment is a women issue. So who has to change? We have to change. Employer, I think HR has to change attitude of each and every person in the company. An employer has to understand, if our company has a policy on workplace harassment, I'll be safe and my employees are safe, and I will retain my good employees. I will not be having absenteeism. My customers will be happy. My profit will go up. These are the things I think we should be talking. I hope I did justice, and we have more to talk.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I mean, I can say that you are truly passionate about what you do, and it really, really was demonstrated, not just in the content that you shared from your personal experience, but the manner in which you did present, what you just did. It really shows that you spoke from the heart, and this is a cause that is really close to your heart. One thing that you did mention that really struck a chord was the story of this lady who, after 11 years, she has a baby, and then the next thing you know, her superior officer, who is also a woman, and you don't expect that from a woman, she's transferred to, far away from her loved ones, and so she's compelled to tender her resignation. But as a lawyer, mind you, as a lawyer, she chose not to pursue it, but to tender her resignation. Asela, I think that's a very, very serious rebuke of the system, of the administration of law in Sri Lanka with regards to labor. So I'm going to use that particular scenario to ask you, okay, we have all these laws, right? But do they work? In theory, they should, but in practice, is it really effective? And if not, what should we do to address this issue?
Yes, Mokshini. As you know, as lawyers, we know how the system works. The biggest problem in this country is the duration of the case. It's true that all these acts are there. Like, if there is an harassment, I think I will then have to go and speak of the employee. So these employees will have to, there is recourse. They have to go and make a complaint to the labor department, and they can have a labor inquiry, or they can go to the labor tribunal. And Mokshini, you and I know as lawyers how long these things take. It's agonizing for the employer as well as the employee. There are some labor issues. They have created issues and they have walked out. The companies have suspended these employees, but the companies have to give their payment. So the salaries are paid. I think recently also I came across a situation where a reputed company, this lady has gone and lodged entries against this company for falsifying a document or something. But the company is paying the salary, and fighting a case with this lady. So company pays the money, pays in lakhs to this lady, and files an action and fights an action. So those are our problems in this country. I think there should be easy ways. There should be times set out, and then those are the issues. And like the she said about the sexual harassment part of it. So the sexual harassment part of it, always there are laws in the penal code, but when an employee has a complaint, you will see Mokshini, there's an interesting definition of the sexual harassment, 345 of the penal code. If I read it, I don't think you have also realized this, Dino. It says in the explanation of section 345, which defines sexual harassment, it says this: unwelcome sexual advances by words or actions used by a person in authority in a workplace or any other place shall constitute an offense of sexual harassment. So, Dinu, only a boss, a person who is in authority, a superior makes an advancement to a junior officer, that's a sexual harassment. Why is it like this? Why is it the other way around? Why is it a separate definition like this in the penal code? Why is an employer, a superior, categorized differently? So there can be a situation where even a lady makes a junior officer makes a sexual advance, but the act specifically defines that if a person in authority makes a sexual advance, yes, it falls within this ambit. So my thing, I think I had a small chat with Dinu also with regard to this issue, Mokshini. Now, there are certain companies, they have policies, they have set up certain policies. So when they have an employment agreement, they set out how, if an employee comes across a problem, how they should initiate. Now there are sexual harassment. If there's a sexual harassment, workplace harassment, what should they do? So I think Dino will speak of, there is, I think, in officers, I'm not very familiar about this whistleblower policy. Who will complain first? And these penal laws. So I asked Dino whether there is a conflict. Can a person, without informing the company, can she go to the police station and lodge an entry? Will that hamper her rights in the office? If she goes to the police station, will the company say that you have gone to the police station, go and sort it out there? Don't come and complain to us. I think this is a very, very pertinent question, because a person recently called me saying that we have a policy with regard to sexual harassment in our company. Without complaining, can I go to the police station? I'm being continuously harassed. So I said, definitely yes. This is a statutory right. These laws are set up. So you can go to the police station. So no one can take out the penal code, the rights you have gained through these statutory laws will supersede. So those are issues I think Dino will explain better than me. He'll explain with the practical side of it.
Thanks, Asela. Just to ask you, that particular person who came to you for advice, was there any particular reason why he or she preferred to go to the police station instead of using the HR, whatever the policy that had been put in place in the company he or she worked?
No, honestly, Mokshini, this was a CEO of a company. Mm-hmm. She called me and asked me, we have a policy like this. This lady is threatening to go to the police station and lodge an entry. But since we have this policy, shouldn't she come to me first?
Okay. Okay.
I said, no, she has an option.
Because the
And
statute
I don't know what
supersedes.
definitely supersedes. So we'll ask Dino, what will she do in a situation like that?
Yes, good. That actually is perfect transition to what I intended on asking you as well as a follow-up question. As Dr. Sulo pointed out, yes, we know that all these problems exist, but how do we address the problem and have a sustainable solution? And she kept saying the HR department is responsible. She was very passionate about it, okay? And I saw you smiling from ear to ear, Dino, okay? Because that means the onus is on you. Tell us, how can an employer help in a situation like this? What kind of policies would you recommend?
Absolutely, I'll cover that. And I think thanks to Sulo, I think to bring out a lot of practical examples and some beautiful words were spoken, I think, in terms of what can be done. And Asela also thanks for sort of pointing out some of those conflicts that would arise for employers. So let me start by just talking about what employers can do in this space, and perhaps we'll get into a discussion. So I thought of three things, Mokshini, that employers can do to create an environment that would be free from harassment. Yeah. So the first thing I thought of was having a very clear ethics code of conduct and embed this along with the organizational values of the organization, so that it forms the core of the company, and that it is entrenched so deeply into each and every employee, so that it actually forms the core of the employee also. And this space is something that progressive organizations do not compromise at all, and any violations of any kind should be taken very seriously, with even examples to follow. And I think even to Asela's point, whether like the conflict arises within the workplace, where it can be addressed through this violation of the ethics code of conduct of the company, or whether it goes to, like, the country law, where a person goes to the police in a situation where there has been grave misconduct, both can be addressed adequately. But within a workplace, it is usually the contract of employment and what can be done in that space. And like I said, on an acid test on harassment and an acid test here on the ethics code of conduct and values embedding would be where people feel that, okay, there's a certain way that I want to be treated, and I should hence be treating others the same way. So if you form that within individuals, they really know how to behave, what to do and what not to do, and it becomes stronger and stronger, and it really benefits the organization. So that's the first one. The second thing is about how do you have practices that promote diversity and inclusion. I think Asela touched on that in the context setting in the beginning, and also that whole concept of psychological safety. So just on D&I, I think setting a good platform for D&I not only sets up good practices, but also it sort of sets the stage for people to appreciate it. And it is no longer nice to have for companies. Research has actually shown that if you have strong D&I practices, it actually becomes a strategic enabler for organizational productivity. I think that point you touched upon before as well, Mokshini. So it's proven, it is here to stay. So what can companies do in this space? Have diversity and inclusion councils, which are not just manned by those persons of authority, but it would be really people across the company representing different departments, and a good activity calendar, solid activity calendar, which really harnesses the whole diversity aspect of the company. And also, interestingly, now companies, because of all these unprecedented changes that are coming through and people require a lot of resilience to face these things, they're coming up with practices around even having things like mental first aid programs because of that psychological safety component. Just like you have trained first aiders, you have trained cohorts of mental first aiders who are able to really spot a mental issue or a harassment that does take place, and they can give first aid, right? So again, the keywords are the ability to identify, spot, and raise it and give first aid so that it can be nipped in the bud. And also, I think continuous support for people managers to be able to nurture a good conducive working environment, which creates that psychological safety. Because I think you shared a statistic that in Sri Lanka, only 4% really, highlights that there are sexual harassments or any form of harassment that does take place, which is not a great number. So it could be because of the fact, I think, to Sulo's point earlier, are they comfortable to bring it out, and creating that comfort is a huge responsibility, I think, the part of the employer. And also the recourse processes, I think, are similar to the escalation process, which you highlighted in terms of like having very confidential whistleblowing processes, which people can use as vehicles to really escalate some of these issues, which again, they don't get reprimanded for doing so that confidentiality is maintained, but still the issue is addressed. And also raising awareness on some of the issues that we spoke about before, like LGBT and things like that. And I think some of the work that I really admire Sulo doing in the country is, creating these platforms where you have women mentor programs, where you do a lot of these coaching circle type interventions, where you have like-minded people coming together, and that itself forms a support mechanism. So if you can do that within an organization itself, there are groups of people who can really support employees. So it's not really the managers only, but it is they themselves organically are forming and supporting these groups. So these are some practices to adapt. And third key bucket would be continuous education and reinforcement of this particular topic, because the more and more you talk about it, the more and more awareness that you create about it within the company is going to help people to be safe, about it, feel safe, escalate if there's anything, and honestly, the rate in which harassment happens will also go down in the process. So just a few ideas.
Thank you so much, Linusha. My goodness, you packed in so much of valuable information into those few minutes. Just to summarize some of what you highlighted, the importance is to identify, to spot, to raise it, and then to offer first aid where it's necessary. And sometimes the first aid might be in the form of psychological support, which I think is a brilliant idea. I've never heard it before, and I think that would be a fantastic thing to introduce to a corporate environment. But also, I think the importance of reinforcing the fact that this is not good, that this is what harassment is. If you're facing it, it is wrong. If you are engaging in it, it is wrong. And I think it's accepted that when the environment changes, then the tendency for these types of situations to arise also drastically reduce. I mean, it's something even as simple as when you're on a diet, right? You try to avoid the unhealthy food in your fridge, because then you're eliminating the temptation. It's the same, right? If we introduce these policies, and if it's constantly being reinforced, not so much to say that you have to have an overhead announcement every half an hour, not like that, but it can be done very how should I say, below the radar, where you see the leaders, the higher rung of in the hierarchy of the management of the company, where you see the way they behave, the way they treat those immediately below them, there's a trickle down effect, right? So I think whilst the entire purpose of this policy is also is to change the culture in the corporate sector. And when we change the culture in the corporate sector, in these corporates, we find that people are happier to come to work, they're more productive, there's no absenteeism. And then there are times when people, when they're harassed, they do come to work, but their productivity is just, almost nil. And then that affects the bottom line of the company. We see the image of the company being enhanced, because now it looks good. You can have that, as something in your annual report even, we introduced this human resource policy to combat harassment. So, I mean, the sky is the limit if only we have the will. Which brings me to so thank you, Dinusha. I can't thank you enough for enlightening us on that. But Dr. Sulo, there are a few questions that have come in actually from the audience. Thank you to the audience for directing questions to our eminent panel. Dr. Sulo, one thing that has been raised is that one of the main reasons for the lack of reporting, one of the reasons that the statistics don't really reflect the prevalence of harassment in the workplace is because it's not being reported. And the question is, can we change this by creating educational avenues, by educating not just the employee, but even those in their immediate families? So that's a question that has been brought in to see whether there is any practical way of addressing this, not in the corporate environment, but in the home. Doctor?
Yeah, yes, awareness is much wanted, but we have to understand in Sri Lanka, the awareness is taken positively and negatively. Sometimes, even there was no harassment, it can be used, because otherwise it will become like our neighboring country where the law implemented and how it happened. So it should not be just an awareness. It should be a value which is given to your employees, that harassment is actually your violation of human right, or you are really doing something inhuman to another human being. And also that has to come, I think, especially when a woman come out of the family and get employed, the whole family is very concerned about that lady, right? What time she's coming, everything is been there. So that when you have these programs, I did that once when we had a program, and the husbands were having a lot of issues, right? Because they were working on night shifts and they wanted to know. So what we did was we invited husbands for a working day, where they wanted to see how their women are working, how their wives are working, whether their mothers and sisters were safe. So we introduced how in the workplace, and we showed them the value system and everything. So they understood that it's not just that they are his wife or his mother or his daughter is coming and doing something. It's something that person is bringing value and she's respected. So this is what the family needs. Family wants to know whether your wife, your daughter or your mother is safe, or whether she's respected. If we can do that awareness to the family, yes, but we cannot do a fake awareness. That awareness comes from the employer, the management, the staff, and also from customers. So the workplace harassment, if I'm not wrong, I think Asela said it's wherever you work under the work conditions, right? It can be your customer coming into your workplace and making an unwanted gesture. I think that also goes as a workplace harassment. Am I correct, Asela? Yeah. So then we have to ensure, because I remember one of the customer service officer was harassed in a way that one person brought a knife. So that is a harassment and it's a threat. So what you can do is to get more complaints. I think more than complaints, I always say, get the prevention, ensure that prevent. The complaint will give you a legal solution But the mentality, we do not have a counseling system. We only look at, when you're counseling the victim, look at the person who has done it. Maybe he was or she was a victim before, and that person is practicing it. So this is actually, Dinusha, factories used to have these productivity groups where you have to reduce absenteeism and all that. Same way you can have harassment group, how to make awareness. So these are the things, practical, small things we can bring into the corporate world again. It's not about, putting rules and regulation. These will help, but to prevent and ensure that people are safe, people feel secure to come and talk to someone. The issue is we have so many WhatsApp group in companies now. So when this person do this thing and come and say, this guy did while I was going, he gave me a lift and this happened, that goes like, because WhatsApp is there, the groups are there. The Chatur has done this one has done it. These things are the things happening. These are the spreading. The rumors are the main issue. Sometimes it was nothing like that, but rumor has made it so much of issue. Even the victim is feeling ashamed to come and speak about it. So I think it's, it's not about formal or informal sector. It's about we all come into, if we can practice our values, then preach our values, I think we can, people can trust the corporates. People can come, people can speak. Then if that is not the way, then only the legal and all the systems has to go through. Because after you file a case in a labor department, no one going to give you a job in a private sector. I know it very well. I was working for labor department for a long time. So I know it won't, because the reference, who's going to give you reference? So we have that. That's the scary thing that many of the employees has. There is a case going on. So will anyone hire you? No. So we have to be ensure that, because Sri Lanka is a small world, right? It's a small, everyone knows everyone. Corporate world is a very small world. HR, when you have a HR conference, all the top HR people are there. So aren't they going to talk about who has been recruited, who's going to be recruited? There are. So we have to ensure that while you protect your employee and employee, one thing we all have to remember, your brand name depends on not your product or your service, your employee. So we have to be understood that.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you so much. Asela, there is a question that has come in, actually two questions that have come in via Facebook. And that is with regards to what you highlighted about harassment and the definition of harassment. One is if the definition of harassment in the penal code is when the sexual harassment takes place by the superior towards a junior officer, but does that in that event, would a situation where two colleagues of the same standing, if one person is harassing the other, does that also constitute sexual harassment? That's one. The other question is, what should an employer do? What recourse does the employer have in the event that an allegation is falsified? There are false allegations made with regards to sexual harassment. So I'm just lumping two questions together in the interests of time. If you could just quickly help us with those two questions. Thank you.
Hi, Mokshini.
Hey, did you hear me?
Hi. You can hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yes, I think something went wrong with my
no
internet.
Problem. You're good. You're loud and clear.
Mokshini, yes. This is what I said. When you read the definition of sexual harassment, it definitely covers it. But what I'm saying is, in the definition, as an explanation, what I read is there. Underneath the section, as an explanation, what I said was clearly written. So I did not rule out the fact that even a junior officer or senior officer, they can rely on the main division and file action. But when I was speaking about it, I emphasize this discrimination, but specifically categorized in this section. So these are the things, even when we think of legal reforms, we should highlight this type of factors. When there is a general definition, why do we need an explanation to say that if an employer does something to a junior officer, it should cover in the general definition of sexual harassment? So these things should be taken out. They should rely on the normal section, because these are unnecessary burdens on the employer. What are the laws governing the employer? Can in a situation like this, a COVID-19 situation, for retrenchment, to close down a business, are there laws which are governing the employer? What they should do is every time go to the labor commissioner, seek relief. It's not. There are no straightforward laws governing the employers. They have been harassed as well. Sometimes there are companies who are running companies to pay the wages of their employees, because the labor commissioners have not given them permission to shut down. So those are I personally feel that is also part of an harassment. They have been harassed as well. So that should include the harassment part of it, not only the employee. Look at the burden on the employer. So the answering to your question, the main definition stands, Mokshini.
Okay, Asela, there is also this situation that has been highlighted, in that when there is a falsified allegation made with regards to sexual harassment against the employer, against the company, what recourse does the employer have to the law, or what can they do to resolve the issue?
The normal law will apply, Mokshini. It's a criminal action will proceed. If there is evidence, they will file action. Then if there is a false fabricated case, if the person gets acquitted, he has the remedy to file a damages action for wrongful prosecution. They can even file action against the police. So it's just a damages action. There's nothing else. And if the police at the initial stages get to know that it's a false complaint, they can file a criminal action for false complaint.
Mokshini, I'm just jump in there because there's a follow-up question on that particular question. Asela, on that particular question, we have a follow-up, which is that, so by what you are saying, in other words, the damage to the employer is already done.
Yes.
Right. Okay, there you go. The answer was a mere yes. So
yes.
Let's
already done.
Would you be able to elaborate on that, and how employers can possibly protect themselves in these situations?
In a criminal action, right? It's very difficult for me to tell you that the employer can protect themselves. So when they file an action, whether it's fabricated or not, so there are ways and means. Now there are new systems in companies. There are CCTV cameras set up. Now there are in every place there are CCTV cameras, and they have to keep their backups. So that by doing things like that, the company can protect themselves. Apart from that, in a sexual harassment case, 345 case, it's very difficult for a company to have a set plan. And I can't even tell a company how they will have to protect themselves. For an example, we had a case, the CEO sacked a minor employee, the lady. She tore the letter and in front of the manager, and she left the office, waited few minutes, waited for the CEO to walk out. She saw the CEO walking down the stairs. She waited until the CEO entered the stairway. She knows that there is no CCTV cameras down the stairways. Then she ran behind the CEO, went to the police station, removed a button of a blouse, and made a complaint that she was sexually harassed on the stairway. So what can I advise? I have to tell, be careful. Have a CCTV camera on the stairway as well. So those are things. Those are practical things, right? They have to look out for themselves. They have to be mindful that these things can happen.
Thank you, Asela. Yes, it may not seem like the type of answer that the particular person was expecting. As Rai pointed out, the damage is already done, but there are ways to minimize the occurrence of these things. Rai, how are we doing on time? Because we're well over time now.
Yes, we're interestingly very well over time, but we still have all our participants online. I think there's more questions coming in as well. So as long as the panelists are okay, we can take the questions and.
Sure. So maybe we'll take about 2 more questions and then we'll see how it goes from that point onwards. The next question actually, Rai, beg your pardon, Dinusha, is with regards to HR, the HR department. Okay. So the question, if I'm to read it verbatim, is driving the corporate policies lies with the HR department of a company. The question on equity and equitable treatment lies on how independent the HR role is from the senior management. So what the question is, can you draw some light on the independence of the HR role in this context? I think we talked about this during our chat yesterday in preparation for the webinar. So yes, all yours, Dinusha.
Yes, so I think before I talk about the independence of the HR department, Mokshini, I think something that needs to be said is that the ethics policies or everything that you have within the company is not really the HR department who drives it. And if the HR department alone starts driving it and policing it, that itself will set things up for failure. Yeah, so and this has happened in the past, and I've seen this happening in a lot of organizations. So something that I would encourage corporates to do is, as you set up some of these practices or policies or whatever that you may call it to create that conducive environment, it has to be embedded in the organization. When I say organization is made out of people, and this whole sect of senior management and otherwise is something, it's a thing of the past. It is really how you embed it within the entire company. And me as a HR professional, I think instead of thinking of myself as belonging to a particular function, for me to really drive certain things within an organization, what will be required is to wear an enterprise hat. So that you understand what the business requires, you join hands with the rest of the business and its people, and you really ensure that it is like a well oiled machine or like almost like an ecosystem which sort of feeds each other, and it's a sustainable form moving forward. So that is why I said in one of the things that I suggested that organizations do in creating that ethics policies, and also in how you embed the values of the organization, so that you need to entrench it into each and every employee within the company. That's only when it can become sustainable. Otherwise, if somebody starts doing it centrally and policing it and running after it, I think it's going to be a recipe for disaster. So that's the first part of it. The second is, I think, the whole independence aspect again. Gone are the days that you think of functions as silos or departments as silos. I think it's important that the credibility of what you're saying is maintained and exercised. I think that it just does not apply to only HR, but it applies to, I think, every employee and division of the company. But yet, I think what perhaps the question was posing was perhaps built on a premise of credibility. I think that credibility would run across, and through that credibility, I think a good foundation will get built to ensure that any concern that does come up is handled confidentially and is not really biased. I think perhaps that was the premise of the question. So I think that's why I said, when you're setting up certain systems, whether it's escalation procedures to HR, to your whistleblowing platforms, that entire system of escalation has to be properly ring-fenced so that information just does not leak out. Because if it does happen, that whole credibility will be lost, and the complainant or the victim or even the alleged party in the case would be unfairly treated. So I think maintenance of confidentiality and also exercising, I think, due diligence in the process, so that either the complainant nor the alleged is cornered till the real facts are being brought to the table and justice is followed. So I hope I answered the question.
I believe you did. I think you covered all the bases there and you left no stone unturned in that where that question is concerned. So thank you so much for that. Rai, I think I'm just going to wind up, not before posing a question to Dr. Sulo. Given the fact that you are, you do so much of work down at the grassroots level, and you not only see things from the grassroots level, but also you said that you have been involved in human resource management, you come from that kind of background, you've worked in the labor department, so you have an idea from the micro, and you also have an idea with the macro as well, when the macro perspective is concerned as well. So that's why I would like to give you the platform to speak just a few last parting words on how you think, given the experience that you have and given what you have seen in your work as an activist, what would you recommend would be the best way to change mindsets, not just of employers, but employees, so that, most of the questions that we got from the panelists, from the audience, was real, absolutely authentic problems that they're facing, where the system is abused to an extent. So we have a situation where there are laws in place, there are systems in place, and maybe the HR policy of that company is also fantastic. But at the end of the day, if the people who are using that HR system, they're mechanizing it as a weapon, they're weaponizing it to abuse it, then it is completely pointless. So I know it's a loaded question, Doctor, but I think you would be the best person to answer. How can we change hearts and minds of not just employers, but employees as well?
So that's one of the major challenges corporates face today. They look for skilled employees. Are they looking for valued employees, right? We are looking for the biodata, right? Are we now only we are looking at the attitudes, the behaviors and all that when we are recruiting. And a society which is already corrupted, a school system which is actually putting out children with good grades, not children with attitudes and values and all those cultural things. Are we trying to get an employee who's going to adjust to a corporate culture is one of the major questions actually the corporates are facing, because now the corporates are actually adopting sometimes a employee who's coming from a background who doesn't know what is the respect, what are the values. So we corporates are on a risk, and especially when the legal system is not going to help them. So where we have to start? We have to start with us, from home to the school to the the institutes, the universities, then to the recruitment agencies. So when we have all these, recruitment day, labor day, HR day, rather we speak about the systems and all that, it's high time we talk about these issues. What are the values and how should be the employees? It's not only about having qualification. It's not only about having competencies. You can have an MBA, you can have a PhD, and you can do whatever this thing from digitally to the manually. But if you don't have that right attitude, if you do not have that value system, you're not going to be that employee, and you are going to be a troublesome employee to that employer. I know great employees. They are superb. They can do wonders. But that person will be putting the corporate in a risky situation. I have 2 or 3 cases I can tell openly. So what we have to understand is when actually the corporates are now more functioning with universities. I have seen, if you go to, I think, Dirushan, if you go to Canadian University, the marketing department, HR department, they invite private sector to come and tell how we have to change our curriculum. So in that's an opportunity for corporates to tell them what you need to change in the curriculum. And when you have school invited the corporates, speak to them openly. What we are looking at, we are not just looking at the numbers, we are not just looking at qualification, we are not just looking at your skills. We want some employee who bring a brand, who can continue that brand along with our company brand. That's when the companies can say, hey, we have a corporate brand, which is our employee's brand. Employer never can have a brand without employee having a brand. This is why I always say social media, if you look at it, all Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn, or Twitter, employee put where they work, but they put all the political views, everything. Employer think that's their personal profile. That's where employer should say, look, you are representing our company. Ensure that. So I think it's not about, I'm telling you again, it's not about policies or it's not about putting raw laws. It's about where you bring it your employees. I remember, I think 10 years ago, we always look at the background where that person comes. We look at the parents and we shouted and said, don't look at, it's not that whether they are wealthy or that, whether they are coming from a background, that value system is the number one key. That's what it mattered. So it's high time we just look back and see whether this person who brings these skills and qualifications has the right attitude, has the opportunity to adjust to our culture. So I think then you don't need all these policies. Employer doesn't want to spend money on cameras, right? Because that person is not going to harass that employer. So this is the one of the major things. Now employee has to pay his salary. Employee has to invest on training on skills. Employee has to invest on counseling. Employee has to invest on putting that culture into his mind. It's like you are basically adopting a child and giving a new birth into your system, which is so expensive. So we have to understand it's high time, even people who are today looking for jobs, it's high time you get this right. If you do not have these things in line, you're not going to be hired. So employer also should not desperately hire people. They should have a selection team, and they should, I think, headhunting companies need to be educated. I think it's all about, getting connected with right institute, giving this out. It's not just a webinar is happening. It's making awareness, speaking about loudly. Those are the things we need to make the change. This is what I think.
And what a way it is to conclude this absolutely enthralling and enlightening discussion. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for so unstintingly contributing your thoughts and your views to this valuable discussion. Unfortunately, in the interest of time, we have to close, but not before I tender my thanks to AmCham for bringing up this very important topic. And I want to just, Rai, if you would permit me, one of my favorite authors is Simon Sinek, and I think something that he said really, resonated with me, and it is applicable here. He says, there are two ways you can influence human behavior. You can either manipulate it or you can inspire it. And I think that's what we want at the end of the day. We want to change human behavior. So I think one key takeaway from this entire discussion is that we need to be able to not manipulate it, but to inspire it. Thank you. Over to you, Rai.
Thanks, Mokshini. Absolutely, I completely agree with you. I think one of the primary purposes of this particular topic, and of course this whole series of law review, is in terms of inspiring change. We are looking at contemporary issues with legal context. We talked about labor a month or two ago. We talked about arbitration. We're talking today about workplace harassment and equitable employment. It's all about inspiring change, and that's something that we at AmCham are passionate about, because inspiring that change will inspire a better business environment. A better business environment will, of course, bring about a more developed and developing economy. So it all peters down, and as Dr. Sulochana said multiple times, it's all about the brand, because at the end of the day, it's your personal brand, it's your company's brand, and all of it is what leads to profitability at the end. I think, as Asela put it right at the start, equitable employment or equitable working conditions equal motivation, which equals productivity, which at the end of the day equals profit. And that's where we as a chamber are taking our members and our audience. So thank you to every one of the panelists. I really appreciate the time and the effort and the thought that went into this webinar. I think it's been a record one in that we're coming close to 2 hours actually. And every one of our participants are still online, both on Facebook and on Zoom, and there are still more questions. In fact, Mokshini, you would have noticed that we didn't have time to get through. Joe Silva, I did notice your question. I didn't post it to the panel because I don't believe we have the right resource people on this particular panel to go into that level of detail in terms of labor law. But what I would do is post that to one of our other expert panelists from the labor webinar that we did, and I will try to get the answer across to you via email. And to the others whose questions we had to miss out due to time, we will share them with the panelists, and if we can come up with some answers for you, again, let's rely on email to get that across to you. A quick reminder before we go that this session goes up on our YouTube channel, and of course, liking, subscribing, and viewing will help us to continue bringing these resources to you free of charge. On behalf of AmCham and the team at the Secretariat, on behalf of each of the panelists here, it's good night and God bless from AmCham Sri Lanka. Bye-bye.